Hey everyone, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm making a Gambit video. Now the reason why is we are currently in a triple reputation week for the rest of the week since it is the end of the season. This is a regular thing at the end of every season, but I actually think it's a big deal, especially right now. I know out of all the ritual playlists, Gambit is definitely the least loved by the community and, well, the devs too, it's very dead. But it has some very powerful weapons that a lot of people probably don't even realize exist. So I wanted to talk about those, and I wanted to talk about why you might want to get them. So first of all, Gambit has a number of weapons that have completely exclusive perks that are not available on any other similar weapons. An example of this is a shoot to loot auto rifle, or one of the only contenders to Igneous Hammer in the form of a slide shot explosive payload or a quick draw explosive payload 120 hand cannon. Along with these interesting PvP choices, we also have one of the best shotguns in the game for PvE, with pretty much every meta-defining damage perk and reload perk all able to be combined in any way you want, and on a weapon where you can have multiple perks on a single column, because it is a ritual weapon, which means you can have up to 3 perks per column. And finally, because I don't think grinding Gambit is ever going to be as easy as it is right now ever again, especially after Final Shape when they remove legendary shards, since as it sits right now, they don't seem to be planning on reducing the cost of Glimmer or increasing our Glimmer cap, and Glimmer is basically the only thing that slows us down when it comes to focusing right now, aside from the actual engrams themselves. And one more thing before we actually hop into the weapons, I just wanted to thank everybody for all the support we've been getting, and I also wanted to talk about my plans going into the next season, because like I said in the last video, if you didn't see it, I've got some very big plans. I actually have just finished stockpiling exotics from Lost Sectors into the Postmaster on all 3 characters, so I'm going to be one of the first people to be covering the new exotics next season, so make sure you stay tuned for that, and subscribe if you want to be the first to see it. Now without further ado, let's get into the weapons. So before we go and look at specific weapons, I want to talk about the origin trait of the Gambit weapons, because this origin trait is absolutely cracked. This has to be the greatest origin trait to ever be added to the game. This thing is absolutely insane. So Gun and Run gives you sprint speed like transversive steps or dune marchers or stompies for killing an enemy. You need multiple red bars if you need those, but against players or orange bars it only takes 1, and you get the same movement speed as having transversive steps on for 10 seconds after that kill. Essentially a system in place that says you can't have more than 12.5% sprint speed, and this adds 6.25, and so does transversive steps, so you can have them both. And now that we're looking at the guns, we have 5 options here that I really want to point out to you guys as being something special. First of all, this is going to be the Herod-C. Now, I know a lot of you guys are probably going to doubt me and say, a stasis auto rifle, that can't be good. But here's the thing. This is actually the only auto rifle in the game to have shoot to loot. And it's also in the kinetic slot. Now, currently, as it sits, we have a trace rifle and an SMG with shoot to loot in the energy slot, which are both very good options for shoot to loot. But in the kinetic slot, normally you're stuck with like a scout rifle or something that shoots really slowly. So an auto rifle actually makes for a much better option there. And obviously, depending on the champion stuns for the season, you might end up wanting to use an auto rifle over a scout rifle anyway. And the thing is, pairing it with shoot to loot, we also have Frenzy, which is pretty much just 2 perks in 1, having increased reload and damage. So definitely a great combo here if you could pick up a shoot to loot Frenzy one, but there's also a lot of other pretty good perks on here, like Demolitionist or Subsistence. In addition to that, when it comes to PvP, you've also got a lot of really good rules with stuff like Dynamic Sway and Tap the Trigger, you've got Elemental Capacitor, Hipfire Grip, Perpetual Motion, so definitely a lot of interesting perk combos. And while most of these perks wouldn't really be that special on their own aside from the shoot to loot setup, when it comes to PvP, the Gun and Run origin trait can't sing its praises enough. Absolutely amazing, and definitely worth trying on at least some Gambit weapon if you want to. And we actually have a much stronger weapon for PvP, I'd say, coming up later, so make sure you hang around for that. Alright, and next up, we're looking at the Dead Weight. And this is probably another one that people are going to be surprised by, because it doesn't seem like much at all, nobody's ever using this thing, and of course it is Arc, which is not the strongest element right now. But let's look at the perks. So looking at it right away, we pretty much have Autoloading Holster, we have Lead for Gold, and we have Grave Robber in the 3rd tree, which are all absolutely wonderful ammo and reload perks for shotguns. These are pretty much the top 3, I'd say. And if we look at the damage perks, this thing is packing. We've got Surrounded, we've got 1-2 Punch for the melee builds, and then we've got Vorpal or Frenzy for whichever one your preference is. So as you can see, this thing is absolutely stacked for PvE, and it is absolutely an amazing shotgun, especially if Arc becomes more relevant in the meta in the future. Alright, and next up is going to be the Sniper, Albruna-D, and not to be too repetitive, but once again, I think this one will surprise you, so let's look into the perks. So right away you might notice that Snapshot and Opening Shot are in the same column, which is not ideal for almost any sniper role. However, I want to actually point out something important with the handling on at least this sniper in specific. So if we get all the handling perks, we get brought up to 51 handling. So Snapshot puts our ADS speed at 0.32, right? However, if we're playing an Arc subclass, Elemental Capacitor with Arc actually makes it even faster, and it lets us have Opening Shot with it. So this could be amazing for, the Arc Titans, which is extremely powerful, and also Arc Hunter is very strong with it, and normally I'd take Shotgun with Arc Warlock, but still a great sniper here for Arc subclasses. But if you did want to go down the lane of Snapshot, we actually have good perks in the left column to go with Snapshot as well, including Elemental Capacitor still, especially on Strand Hunter, where you could put on the AE and spec into having a lot of AE, and you end up with a massive amount of airborne effectiveness just on the weapon itself. And if you were to use your grapple and get the Threat of Ascent buff active, then you would just have even more, and it becomes a laser in the sky. Super fun setup. You also have perks like Moving Target, so then you have Snapshot Moving Target, which is the same role that you have on Beloved, a very loved sniper, if you will. And in addition to all this, we actually have a unique PvE use case by having Cascade Point. This is a pretty uncommon perk on snipers, but it's actually very powerful for snipers because they suffer from having bad DPS, but relatively good total damage already on a baseline. But if you don't want the quirky Cascade Point setup, we still have the generic damage perks for snipers like Firing Line and Vorpal Weapon with Triple Tap to still have a pretty normal, just good sniper. And it is a good archetype, being a high impact frame as well, so definitely a decent pick to go for with your engrams. And our last pick, this is going to be the S tier beast. I can't hype this thing up enough, and that's going to be the bottom dollar. A lot of people will think, well, Igneous Hammer just came out, so the bottom dollar can't be better, right? But let's have a look at the perks, because that's where this thing really shines. So right away, we're going to notice 3 absolutely huge perks for hand cannons on this thing near the bottom. And that's going to be Quick Draw or Slide Shot, especially Slide Shot, and Explosive Payload, and Opening Shot too, to a degree. So Slide Shot and Explosive Payload I think is the most unique and powerful role on this hand cannon overall. Now, while this thing doesn't have stats at all compared to the Igneous Hammer, it has the perks to make up for it. If we have a look right here, we can see we have Slide Shot and Explosive Payload as the highlighted perks here, but we also have some absolutely insane other perks on here, like Quick Draw in this slot, and in the final tree we also have something like Opening Shot, we have Eye of the Storm, and then you mix this with Quick Draw or Slide Shot, and you've essentially got one of the most consistent hand cannon rules here. Or you have Quick Draw, which is the best way to do bow swapping right now, because you can't actually obtain a Quick Draw Igneous Hammer anymore. You can only get Slick Draw, which sacrifices all the aim assist and the feel good that Igneous has. If you are going to go after the bottom dollar, which is definitely my #1 recommendation for spinning your engrams, I'm going to recommend you actually spec into a Law of Stability. And here's why. If we go ahead and have a look at the range, you can see it has 60 range stat base, and this is already covering 35 meters. However, something to keep in mind is that Explosive Payload removes essentially half of your damage falloff. It completely negates the falloff. So what this means is your weapon essentially just has less damage falloff, so your range is much less important. And we can actually see if we remove Explosive Payload, the range graph changes drastically. So because of this, I actually recommend speccing as much as you can into handling and stability, because they are absolutely terrible on this weapon. Going for fluted barrel and steady rounds with either a stability or a handling masterwork is a great idea. You could go for range masterwork if you wanted to have more range, but really I do recommend these. But honestly, if you can get the other perks, I definitely recommend just taking any of these. Even without a perfect 5 out of 5, Slide Shot and Explosive Payload just feels so good on a 120 hand cannon, and you have to give it a try. And when you add in the Gun and Run Origin trait, it just turns this thing into an absolute monster. If you made it to the end of the video, I wanted to just say thank you for watching the whole thing, and also to threaten you to subscribe right now or you will be forced to do 50 games of state mandated Gambit. Right now, subscribe.